The morning sun cast long shadows across Maple Creek's manicured lawns as Dr. James Wilson walked steadily along the sidewalk. A white woman on her porch suddenly stiffened, hurried her playing child inside, and reached for her phone, eyes never leaving the 67-year-old black man in a faded military cap. Maple Creek Estates was known throughout the county for its exclusivity and security. Pristine homes valued well over $1 million lined streets named after trees that residents likely couldn't identify. The community had remained overwhelmingly white despite the surrounding area's diversity, a fact not lost on James, who had moved in just 3 weeks ago after retiring from his hospital position. James walked with a slight limp, a souvenir from his second tour in Iraq. His military medical corps cap sat comfortably on his gray-speckled head, its faded caduceus symbol barely visible in the morning light. Despite his age, he maintained the straight-back posture of his military days, his observant eyes taking the vibrant cardinals and blue jays that most residents overlooked. His morning walks had become a ritual since moving in, a way to maintain his health and explore his new surroundings. He noticed how curtains twitched as he passed, how neighbors suddenly found yard work when he approached. The discomfort was palpable, but James had weathered worse. 3 decades in the military medical corps had taught him to maintain dignity regardless of surroundings. He nodded politely at a jogger who crossed the other side of the street upon seeing him. The man's eyes widened slightly, surprised by the courtesy from someone he clearly viewed with suspicion. James continued his walk, unwavering in his commitment to start his day with the same discipline that had guided his distinguished career. A silver SUV slowed beside James, the electric window humming down to reveal a blonde woman in designer sunglasses. This was Karen Sullivan, the same woman who had rushed her child inside moments earlier. Her manicured hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as she leaned toward the window. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice clipped and authoritative. "Can I help you find something? Are you looking for someone's house?" The implication was clear. He couldn't possibly belong in Maple Creek. James stopped walking and turned toward her with measured calm. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm just enjoying a morning walk. I live on Oakwood Drive." He gestured toward the street 2 blocks over. Karen's expression tightened. "Which house exactly?" "I know everyone on Oakwood." Her eyes narrowed behind her sunglasses. "We've had problems with people coming into the neighborhood recently. Package thefts, you understand." "Number 347, James replied evenly. "The blue Colonial with white trim. Moved in about 3 weeks ago." He maintained a respectful tone, despite the obvious interrogation. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's interesting. That house has been for sale for months. I hadn't heard it sold." She reached for her phone. "I'm sorry, but I'm going to need to verify that. We have a neighborhood watch for suspicious activities." James felt a familiar weight of prejudice settle on his shoulders, but years of military discipline kept his expression neutral. "Ma'am, I assure you I live there. I purchased the home from the Hendersons last month." "Well, anyone could say that," Karen replied, already dialing. "Hello? Yes, I'd like to report a suspicious person in Maple Creek Estates. An older black man walking around Maple and Oakwood." She eyed James as she spoke. "He claims he lives here, but I've never seen him before." James sighed quietly. "Ma'am, I'm a retired military doctor. Colonel James Wilson, U.S. Army Medical Corps. I've been abroad and in different states for decades. I chose this neighborhood for my retirement." Karen covered the phone briefly. "Sure you are," she scoffed, disbelief evident. "The police will be here shortly to sort this out. Please stay right where you are." Her tone suggested this was not a request. True to her word, within minutes, a police cruiser pulled alongside them. 2 officers stepped out, hands resting casually near their holsters as they approached. "What seems to be the problem here?" the older officer asked, glancing between Karen and James. Karen immediately launched into her account. "I found this man wandering our neighborhood. He claims he lives here, but I've never seen him before. I'm concerned about recent thefts in the area." The younger officer turned to James. "Sir, can I see some identification, please?" His tone was professional but lacked warmth. "Certainly, officer." James reached slowly for his wallet, movements deliberate and unthreatening. A habit formed from understanding how quickly situations could escalate for black men. He handed over his driver's license. The officer examined it closely. 347 Oakwood Drive. When did you move in, sir? 3 weeks ago. James replied calmly. I'm retired military. Served as a medical officer for 30 years before working at Metropolitan Hospital. Just moved here from Arlington. The officer's posture relaxed slightly at the mention of military service. He returned the license. Seems everything is in order. Sorry for the inconvenience, Colonel. Karen's expression shifted from triumphant to confused. But I've never seen him before. How do we know that's really his address? The older officer turned to her. Ma'am, his ID confirms his residence. He's not doing anything wrong by walking the neighborhood where he lives. Fine, Karen said stiffly, rolling up her window. But I'll be watching. She drove away, casting a final suspicious glance at James. The officers nodded to James. Sorry about that, sir. Have a good day. They returned to their cruiser, leaving James standing alone on the sidewalk. He watched them leave, his dignity intact, but his spirit weighed down. After 3 decades of serving his country, after saving countless lives, both military and civilian, he was still viewed as an intruder, a threat, simply because of his skin color. With a deep breath, he resumed his walk, heading back toward his home, his morning peace thoroughly disturbed. James had barely reached his driveway when he heard a scream pierce the morning quiet. It came from down the street, from the direction of Karen Sullivan's house. Despite his better judgment, he paused, listening. Another scream followed, this one clearly a child's voice, filled with panic. A woman's frantic voice called out, "Max!" "Oh my God," Max breathed. "Someone help." It was Karen's voice, now stripped of its earlier condescension and filled with raw terror. James stood frozen for a moment, conflicted. The woman had just humiliated him, questioned his very right to exist in her space. Every instinct for self-preservation told him to go inside, close the door, and let someone else handle whatever crisis was unfolding. But decades of medical training and military service had ingrained in him a deeper instinct. When someone needed help, you responded. Without further hesitation, he turned and jogged toward the cries, his slight limp more pronounced with the increased pace. When he reached Karen's driveway, he found her kneeling beside her son on the front lawn. The boy, around 10 years old, was lying on his back, face swelling rapidly, lips turning a frightening shade of blue. He was gasping for breath, each inhalation more labored than the last. "What happened?" James asked, kneeling beside them, immediately shifting into doctor mode. Karen looked up, her face a mask of shock when she recognized him. For a moment, she seemed too surprised to speak. "Ma'am, I need to know what happened," James repeated, his voice firm with the authority that had commanded medical teams in war zones. "Is he allergic to something?" "Why, yes," she stammered. "Peanuts. He had a cookie at his friend's house. I can't find his EpiPen. I called 911, but they said it would be at least 15 minutes. Tears streamed down her face as she cradled her son's head. "Please, he can't breathe." James quickly assessed the boy, noting the classic signs of anaphylaxis. "I'm a doctor, retired Army Medical Corps," he said, his military training making his voice calm despite the emergency. "I need to examine him immediately." Karen blinked, comprehension dawning in her tear-filled eyes. "A doctor? You're actually a doctor?" "Colonel James Wilson, former Chief Medical Officer, 3rd Medical Command," he confirmed, already checking the boy's pulse and airways. "And right now, your son needs immediate medical attention." "I have emergency supplies in my home," James said, making a quick decision. "Max needs epinephrine immediately. The ambulance won't arrive in time." Karen nodded frantically. "Please, anything. Please help him. I need you to stay with him. Keep him as calm as possible. I'll be back in under 2 minutes." James rose to his feet with military quickness that belied his age and ran to his house despite his limp, each step purposeful and urgent. He returned moments later, carrying a weathered medical bag emblazoned with the Army Medical Corps insignia. Kneeling beside Max, whose breathing had become even more labored, He unzipped the bag with practiced efficiency. "Veterans like me keep emergency kits," he explained calmly while preparing an epinephrine injection. "Habits from deployment never quite leave you." His hands moved with the steady precision of someone who had performed similar procedures under far worse conditions in dusty field hospitals with mortars exploding nearby. "Karen, I need you to hold his shoulders exactly like this," James ordered, using her first name intentionally to establish connection. "When I give you the signal, turn his head exactly 15 degrees to the right. Not more, not less." "Understood." Karen, startled by his commanding tone, followed his instructions without question. The transformation the man she had reported to police was complete. Gone was the meek older gentleman, replaced by a commanding medical officer whose authority was undeniable. "Now," James said sharply, administering the injection with perfect technique. Max's body tensed momentarily. Then gradually his breathing began to ease as the medication took effect. "Keep his airway clear. Support his head at this exact angle," James directed, arranging Karen's hands in the proper position. "The epinephrine will buy us time until the paramedics arrive." While monitoring Max's vitals, James continued administering emergency care with practiced efficiency. Karen watched in awe as this man, the same man she had reported as suspicious less than an hour ago, worked to save her son's life with skills that clearly came from years of intensive training and experience. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder until an ambulance pulled into the driveway. 2 paramedics jumped out, equipment in hand. "Anaphylactic shock," James reported as they approached. "Peanut allergy. Administered 0.3 milligrams epinephrine approximately 4 minutes ago. Pulse stabilizing, airways still partially compromised." The lead paramedic nodded, then looked more closely at James. "Dr. Wilson? Colonel Wilson from Metropolitan's Trauma Center?" James nodded briefly. "Hello, Rodriguez. Been a while." "It's an honor, sir," Rodriguez replied, genuine respect in his voice. "We've got it from here, Colonel." As the paramedics took over Max's care, Karen watched the interaction with growing realization. "Colonel," she whispered. "Metropolitan Hospital?" Rodriguez overheard her. "Ma'am, you're lucky. Colonel Wilson here was chief of trauma surgery at Metropolitan for years after retiring from running battlefield hospitals in Iraq. He literally wrote the protocol we're using right now for anaphylaxis." Karen stared at James, recognition dawning in her eyes as she began to understand just who she had reported to police that morning: a decorated military officer, a renowned physician, and now, her son's savior. 3 days later, Max was home recovering when Karen appeared at James's doorstep, her son beside her. Her usual confidence was replaced by genuine contrition as she held a gift basket and an envelope. "Dr. Wilson," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know how to begin to apologize for how I treated you." Tears welled in her eyes. "You saved Max's life after She couldn't finish. James invited them inside with the quiet dignity that characterized everything he did. In his living room, Karen couldn't help but notice the medals and commendations displayed modestly on one wall: Bronze Stars, humanitarian awards, and photographs with generals and presidents. "What I did was unforgivable," she continued once seated. "I made assumptions based on nothing but your skin color. I was so wrong, and I'm deeply ashamed." James nodded thoughtfully. "In the military, Miss Sullivan, we learn to focus on the mission, not past grievances. The mission that day was saving Max. Everything else was secondary." Max, shy but determined, handed James a handmade card. "Thank you for saving my life, sir," he said quietly. James accepted it with a warm smile. "You're very welcome, young man." That evening, as James sat on his porch watching the sunset, he reflected on his journey, from a young black medical student facing doubt at every turn, to a decorated colonel, to a retired veteran still fighting different battles. Perhaps, he thought, the most powerful weapon against prejudice isn't anger or retaliation, but excellence and compassion. The military had taught him that true strength lay not in dominating others, but in remaining steadfast in your principles even when tested. The neighborhood had changed toward him, but James wondered about all the other black veterans across America facing similar prejudice without the chance to prove their worth through dramatic rescues. How many were judged by appearance rather than character? How many had to constantly earn the respect their service already warranted? Have you ever witnessed someone being misjudged based on appearance alone? Or perhaps you've been that person. Share your story in the comments below. We particularly want to hear from veterans of color whose service and sacrifice often go unrecognized in everyday civilian life. If this story touched you, please consider liking and sharing it to honor the Black veterans in your community who continue to serve with dignity despite facing prejudice. Subscribe to see more stories that highlight the ongoing struggles and triumphs of those who've served our country, yet still fight for acceptance at home. Remember, true heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they're a retired colonel living next door, walking alone each morning, carrying wisdom and compassion earned through decades of service.